So we've been talking about Flourish for our spring message series, and we've been talking about ways to flourish not only in your relationship with God, but kind of just in life in general. How do we flourish? And recently, I guess it was about 2 weeks ago, we had a few days of significant rain, and I just remember thinking, what a beautiful picture of flourishing, because everything began to turn green again. The birds are returning from down south, and it smells beautiful. Flowers are blooming, all of that kind of stuff. And that reminded me of the season that we're in as a church. This is our spring season as a church because we're being born, a lot of new things happening, a lot of growth, a lot of provision pouring in like rain. We've got our denomination supporting us. We've got Rick and the Auger Foundation who are making it possible through their generosity for us to get our own building, which I think we really need. But sometimes when it rains, it gets messy. And so with the building stuff, the ups and downs, the back and forths, it's a little messy, but this is an amazing, blessed season, and I think we need to acknowledge that and be aware of that because it's exciting. It's exciting watching this thing sprout up from the ground. So then that whole thing kind of got me thinking about how there are seasons in life and that all of us experience seasons in life. Just like there are 4 seasons in nature, we have seasons personally. And so for part 6 of our Flourish message series, I want to talk about seasons. Now, seasons as a metaphor, we can look at that a couple different ways. We can look at it like the general seasons in life, like our youth and childhood and stuff are like spring, all these new things happening, growth, stuff like that. Young adulthood is like summer because it's hot and it's full of fun activities. I say it's hot because one of the young adults recently said to me, all young adults are hot, and it's not until they get like your age and that they're just not hot anymore. I'm like, thank you for that. I appreciate it. No problem. And then fall is like being old, or maybe like over 40. It's like we begin to live the autumn season of life. And there's, things start to change color a little bit like fall and or, all the leaves fall out, one of the two. But, life just begins to winding down. But there's maturity and fruitfulness in the autumn season of life. And it's a time of harvest. Then winter is like death because in winter it's like everything dies, all the leaves fall out and just doesn't seem to be any life. So that's one way of looking at the seasons as a metaphor, but for my purpose this morning, I want to look at it like seasons are something that happen often and in a lot of different ways. So spring it's still a beginning, right? But in this metaphor, there's a lot of beginnings in our life, just like there's a lot of natural springs in our life. In some ways, there's a lot of beginnings in our life. I've already mentioned Renovate as one example, but it can be things like a new job, starting a new school, a new baby, a new relationship, even stuff like a new car or a new house. Those are all new beginnings, and it's a great feeling. We love newness, don't we? Some of us could spend forever in spring, like new stuff all the time. But then we'd never get to summer. And, especially as kids, we love summer, right? we. I'm not a kid. That's faux show. But do you remember as a kid that feeling of being outside from morning until night, and we would just hang out with our friends and ride our bikes and play games, and it was warm outside and there was no school? Woohoo! That was the best part, no school. And the days seemed like they would last forever. They would just go on and on because the sun wouldn't go down until like after 9 o'clock. Where I grew up, it didn't go down until almost 10 o'clock in the summer. So the days were just so full. You packed so much into them. The longest days of my life that I can remember were those days. It seemed like a whole season happened just in one day. Now, to me, as a metaphor, summer is, as a life season, feels like it's the normal. You know, things aren't really new, but they're not really old yet. And for many, this is our favorite season. We want things to always feel normal and kind of unobstructed. But it can't be summer forever. As much as especially children would love for it to be summer forever, it can't be summer forever. Sooner or later, fall has to come, and we have to go back to school. And I remember as a kid, I hated the fall for that very reason. Specifically because a couple of years, about the first year and a half of junior high was really torturous for me. I hated it. So I hated fall then. But as an adult, and the older I get, I think now fall is my favorite season. Because even though there are some challenges physically to getting older, you know, you don't heal as fast, your eyes start to go, so you need glasses, your hearing declines, you know, our bodies just start to decline. But there's incredible blessing that comes as we age. Lots of different kinds of blessing. Number one, wisdom. You know, like when we were younger, we thought we knew everything, but the older we get, the more we see how little we know. And with that comes wisdom. And wisdom really does make life better. And then in this age, you know, there's other like practical things like we're more established. We have more time sometimes, depending on what kind of job you have. But we definitely have more resources, and we have our own place, our own car. You know, a lot of people say that youth is wasted on the young. And I get that. It's like when you're young, you have all this energy and, you know, and stuff like that, but you have no resources. But then you get older and you have all these resources, but, you know, maybe your body's falling apart or whatever. But then there's just the fact that life becomes more stable when you, in the fall season of life. You just start to settle into who you are, what your world should look like. You're more comfortable with things. So now even outside of the whole age-related things, there are many fall seasons in our life, even when we're young. And I look at that as just like a time of harvest, a time of abundance. So this can be a really beautiful and comfortable season, but then inevitably the winter comes. Now in this metaphor, the winter represents suffering and hard times. It's cold. It's lifeless. It's hard. And there just doesn't seem to be much signs of life. And the nights come way too early in the winter, right? And they last way too long. And for some of us, it's almost like we live in North Alaska or in the Arctic because, you know, the night seems to last forever. And it seems like it's always winter. In other words, some of us suffer a lot. Some of us go through really long seasons of suffering. But even in that, even in the winters of life, we can find beauty there. We can experience incredible beauty. Did you ever go outside after a really huge snowstorm and maybe you're going to shovel or something, and you go outside and it's just so still. It's so quiet. It's almost like the snow absorbs all the sound, and it smells crisp and clean, and you can see forever. The air is clear, and it's sparkly and brilliant white. There's stuff like that even in the difficult seasons of life. We can find solace, we can find peace and quiet and even beauty. And just like in nature, winter seems to be like, it seems to cleanse the world. At least that, I don't know if it's only me, but I've always perceived it that way. I spent a lot of time in places where they didn't have a proper winter. And the thing I missed was that cleansing that winter brings, that kind of reset that it brings. Now, we may love some seasons and hate others, or we might find the good in all of the seasons. But in any case, all of us, every one of us, experience all of the seasons at some time in our life. And you know what? They all have a purpose. This is what Solomon said about it. There's a time for everything, and every season, and a season for every activity under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones and a time to gather them. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to search and a time to give up. A time to keep and a time to throw away. A time to tear and a time to mend. A time to be silent and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. So there's a time for every season, and there's a purpose to every season in our life. So I want to just take a few minutes and spend some time kind of pulling out some points from these seasons that we experience in life. And the first thing that I want to talk about is change. Because really, seasons are about change. If it was always winter, we wouldn't even call it winter. It would just be always. It would just be, So seasons are about the change. And change for all of us is unavoidable. It's inevitable. We all are going to experience change. Some of that change is really good, like a huge promotion at work or something like that. And some of it's really hard, like the loss of something or someone that we really care about. But if there's one thing that is for sure in life, things are going to change. Now, I have kind of developed a life philosophy around the fact that everything changes. And it goes something like this. In every season of life, we should enjoy the good parts, we should endure the hard parts, and we should always, always remember things are going to change. That's so important, because if we spend our life looking back, or if we spend our life, if we the good old days, if we're just always living in the past, or even if we're always living in the future, thinking about how good things are going to be, or I can't wait till this is over or that is over, I can't wait till this happens, well, then it's really easy to miss the beauty of the moment, the goodness that exists here and now. So I want to just encourage you, live in the now. Be present in the now. Be present in the present. Enjoy the good things, endure the hard things, and always remember things are going to change. Because once we embrace that, once we keep in front of us that every season, the best seasons of life and the worst seasons of life are going to end. Because in your suffering, you'll remember this too shall pass. And in your blessing, you'll keep the reality of eternity in front of you. If you remember that it's going to change. And then that philosophy helps you to navigate change properly. Because the truth is, change should be managed, not manipulated. Change should be managed, not manipulated. I mean, everybody in this room would agree that we ought to trust God, right? Can I get an amen? We ought to trust God. I have never met a Christian who said, I'm surrendering my life to God, but I don't trust him. That's just silly. You wouldn't give your life to someone that you don't trust. But see, saying that we trust him and actually trusting him are two very different things. It's easy to trust God in the summer, in the blessed, abundant seasons of life. But it's another thing altogether to trust God in the winter and when things get difficult. Somebody say amen. Come on. If you've been alive any length of time, you know that this is true. But it's in those hard times when we're tempted to manipulate the change, to make something happen, to make it happen despite the fact that it's not going to happen, or to keep it from happening when it's inevitable. For example, maybe someone you love has lived a long life and they're old and they're just ready to go be with Jesus, but we're not ready. So we try to hang on and we try to, when in reality we all know that death is the end for all of us. We are all going to experience the end of our life. Every one of us is going to die. Every one of us is going to end this life. Or maybe it's something like your kid is graduating and moving out. Maybe you're becoming an empty nester and you're just really struggling with that, which of course, I'm experiencing that right now. My youngest is about to graduate. And it's hard to lose someone you love. It's hard to let go sometimes. But the point is, we can either attempt to manipulate those situations. I could make my youngest son live at home forever. That's kind of creepy, though. He's back there laughing. He's like, yeah, that's not going to happen. We can not let go of someone after they're gone, or we can trust God. We can trust God with every season. We can let go. Proverbs 3:5 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to God, and he will make your path straight. Listen to me, you guys. There's a time to hold on, and there's a time to let go. There's a time to resist change, and there's a time to accept it. Those are seasons in life. But when it's time to let go, trust God. Trust him with that change. Don't try to manipulate it, because it never goes well when we try to take things into our own hands as opposed to God's hands, taking it out of God's hands into ours. And that leads to my next point. Don't make permanent decisions based on temporary conditions. Oh man. How many times do we try to do this? So maybe a season of difficulty comes and we go to our close friends and we complain about it, and maybe one of our other friends, we throw them under the bus and we say terrible things about them, or we make an ultimatum, you can't talk to that friend anymore, or I'm not going to be your friend, or or maybe we just, in a heated moment, we disconnect from our group that we're connected to, or maybe even a job. Maybe you are at work and something happens and you go, that's it, I'm done, and you stomp out and you quit your job. So basically, I'm trying to come up with metaphors, but I'm just talking about burning bridges in life based on a momentary feeling, emotion, event, experience. See, but then the next day, maybe the next day you find out things weren't what you thought they were. Oops. Maybe you realize that I was just responding out of my emotion and it was not nearly as bad as I blew it up to be. But see, then the damage is done. So, don't make permanent decisions based on temporary conditions. Trust God. Don't take it into your own hands because you'll make a mess of it. The Bible says, be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes. See, this whole chapter is amazing if you're going through stuff where you feel like you're being attacked or you're going through bad stuff. I'd encourage you to just spend some time meditating on Psalm 37. It's amazing. But my point here is that when you're experiencing seasons that you don't like, that really rub you wrong, be still and wait on the Lord. Be patient and trust in him. Again, that can be so hard to do, but you'll be much better off in the long run. Next, gratitude is better than grumbling. I've talked a lot about this before. Gratitude is a really powerful thing. Our bodies respond to grumbling or gratitude. Did you know that? When we grumble, when we complain, it releases a chemical into our body called cortisol. And cortisol negatively affects our physical health, and it negatively affects our emotional health and our happiness. While being grateful releases endorphins into our body, which makes us happier and healthier. Maybe that's why the Bible says, do everything without grumbling or arguing. So if you're in a season of life where it's just, you can't see anything to be grateful for, you know what I do when I'm in that place? I find that perspective makes all the difference in the world. I know it sounds crazy, but just looking at something differently can make a huge difference in these situations. Here's a cool little example that I came up with. Around the 20th century, a bar of steel was worth about $5. But when that steel was forged into horseshoes, it was worth double that. It was worth $10. But if we made it into needles, that same steel was worth $350. But when you use it to make pocket knife blades, it's worth $32,000. But when we take that same amount, that same bar of steel, and we make watch springs out of it, it's worth $250,000. That same bar of steel. Now think about how much pounding that steel had to go through to be worth this much. $250,000. See, the more it was shaped and hammered and put through the fire and polished, the greater its value became. It's the same for us. You see, hard seasons will work for our good if we let them. James wrote, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking in anything." James is adding perspective here. He's saying that the hard seasons of life will produce good. They will add value to our life. So in your suffering, you can simply shift in that season, shift and find the good. Enjoy the good, even if there doesn't seem to be any good. All right, so to summarize this, life is a series of seasons, lots of them. Some of them are beautiful and good. Some of them are ugly and hard. Some of them are long and seem to last as long as a winter in the Arctic. And some of them are very brief. But remember, everything will change. Every season is going to end someday. Every season, including this season we call life. What really matters, please hear me, what really matters is what we do with those seasons. How we view them, how we respond to them, what we do. I have a little story. That's kind of not little, but I want to read this story. It was written by Max Lucado, and it was in this book of short stories, and I found it really powerful for what I'm talking about, so I'm just going to read it. A little boy is on the beach. On his knees, he scoops and packs the sand with plastic shovels into a bright red bucket. He upends the bucket on the surface and lifts it, and to the delight of the little architect, a castle tower is created. All afternoon he will work, spooning the moat, packing the walls. Bottle tops will be sentries. Popsicle sticks will be bridges. A sandcastle will be built. Big city, busy streets, rumbling traffic, a man in his office. At his desk, he shuffles papers into stacks and delegates assignments. He cradles the phone on his shoulder and punches the keyboard with his fingers. Numbers are juggled and contracts are signed. And much to the delight of the man, a profit is made. All his life he will work, formulating the plans, forecasting the future. Annuities will be sentries, capital gains will be bridges, an empire will be built. Two builders, two castles. They have much in common. They shape granules into grandeurs. They see nothing and make something. They are diligent and determined, and for both the tide will rise and the end will come. Yet that is where the similarities cease. For the boy sees the end while the man ignores it. Watch the boy as the dusk approaches. As the waves near, the wise child jumps to his feet and he begins to clap. There is no sorrow, no fear, no regret. He knew this would happen. He's not surprised. And when the great breaker crashes into his castle and his masterpiece is sucked into the sea, he smiles. He smiles, picks up his tools, takes his father's hand, and goes home. The grown-up, however, is not so wise. As the wave of years collapses on his castle, he is terrified. He hovers over the sandy monument to protect it. He blocks the waves from the walls he has made. Saltwater soaked and shivering, he snarls at the incoming tide. It's my castle, he defies. The ocean need not respond. Both know to whom the sand belongs. I don't know much about sandcastles, but children do. Watch them and learn. Go ahead and build with a child's heart. When the sun sets and the tide takes, applaud. Salute the process of life. Take your father's hand and go home. Jesus said, truly I tell you, unless you change and become like a little child, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. I remember as a kid when it was spring and it was raining, I would just love to go outside and sit in the puddles, splash around, ride my bike through it. In the summer, I would love staying out, like I described earlier, all night and until the sun went down, playing kick the can or whatever. In the fall, I was just in awe of the beauty of the leaves changing color, especially in the Midwest. It was just awe-inspiring. And even in the winter, I would just love to breathe in the crisp, cold air and enjoy the beauty of the snow. You know, we've lost our wonder as we get older. We're tempted to lose that sense of awe. But it's not supposed to be that way. Jesus said, we're supposed to be like little children. I think this is what he meant. The awe, the simplicity, the trust. So my prayer is that we would never lose our wonder.